what if the laws of physics aren't actually laws at all? Like, what if gravity, the speed of light, and even, the very atoms vibrating in your own body right now are actually just the byproduct of a cosmic software program,
Right.
a literal source code that is constantly running to render the universe in real time.
Yeah, I mean, it is the absolute definition of a paradigm shift.
Hmm.
We find immense comfort in things that can be isolated. We like things that can be weighed,
Yeah.
categorized.
Totally, we like tangible stuff.
Exactly. You want to know what a house is made of? Well, you look at the bricks. You want to know what the universe is made of? And standard physics points to a particle accelerator,
Yeah.
right? It shows you a jagged line on a sensor and says, hey, there it is. That's a quark.
Right, it's very particulate, very localized.
Yeah, tangible.
Yeah.
But this proposition, I mean, it suggests we are moving from physics as a collection of physical objects to physics as a continuous computational language.
Exactly. And that is really our mission today. We are taking a deep dive into an incredibly dense, just mind-bending manuscript by George James Dukas.
It's quite a read.
Oh, it's huge. It outlines what he calls the transdimensional unified field theory, or TDUFT for short. The text itself is literally titled The Source Code of Creation.
Which is a bold title.
Super bold. And we are going to unpack this today. We're looking at this architectural blueprint of reality. We're going to explore how pure mathematical operators, the golden ratio, and human consciousness itself all kind of interlock.
Right.
So to you listening, consider yourself a fellow explorer on this journey today. We are looking for the foundational lattice of reality itself. And I guess we should make it clear right up front, we aren't saying this is the absolute scientific truth, right?
No, of course not.
We're just, reporting on the ideas presented in the specific source material. It's a theoretical framework, and we are just mapping it out.
Yeah, and what's crucial to establish right away is exactly how this source material treats mathematics. Because, I mean, in our standard framework, the one we all learned in high school, right, math is basically a descriptive tool.
Right, like you count apples.
Exactly. We observe an apple falling from a tree,
Yeah.
we observe the physical act of gravity, and then we invent a mathematical equation on a piece of paper to describe what gravity just did. But TDUFT, it presents mathematics not merely as a way to describe physics, but as the generative grammar that actually produces physics.
So wait, the math comes first.
The math comes entirely first. And the ultimate destination of this framework, which is the place we are heading today, is the realization that the human mind and, our very DNA, they're not passive observers trapped inside this universe.
They're active.
Yeah, they're active components. Specifically, the text argues they act as these zero-point engines running on this exact source code.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to understand how the universe runs, I feel like we first have to look at its operating system, right?
Makes sense.
I want to jump straight into the hard structural math that purportedly generates reality. The manuscript introduces this foundational lattice, which it calls the transdimensional lattice operator equations, or the TDLOEs.
I can see TDLOEs.
Yeah, and it says they all stem from a single root, the unified dimensional operator, the UDO. So before we get into the specific equations of the lattice, what exactly is a unified dimensional operator?
Well, to grasp the UDO, we really have to let go of the idea that space is just an empty room where things happen.
Okay.
In this theory, the UDO is the absolute baseline geometric code. The manuscript describes it operating on what mathematicians call Hilbert spaces.
Hilbert spaces? Sounds complicated.
It's, a Hilbert space is basically a concept of an infinite dimensional mathematical space. It's a realm of pure mathematical potential. So the UDO is the singular overarching command that begins to organize that infinite potential into something real.
So let me try to visualize this. If the universe is like a video game, is the UDO the core machine code? Like, I'm thinking of the foundational ones and zeros running on the game server, and then the TDLOEs, the lattice equations, are the specific rendering engines that take that code and draw the light and the physics and the mass on the screen for the player.
That is a highly functional analogy, yeah. It gives us a really great starting point, but I would push you to think even bigger.
Bigger than a universe video game.
Yeah, because the limitation of a video game analogy is that the game exists inside a physical computer, right?
Right.
And that computer exists inside a physical room in our physical world. What this manuscript is arguing is a concept called mathematical monism.
Mathematical monism.
Right. These equations don't exist within the universe exists within them. They are unconditional operators. So the math doesn't live in the universe lives in the math.
Hold on. That is a massive distinction. You're saying the universe is just a projection of these equations.
Precisely. If we connect this to the bigger picture, it means that every physical law you experience daily, like, the reason a dropped coffee mug shatters on the floor, or the reason light takes 8 minutes to travel from the sun to your eyes, it's all simply the stabilized expression of this recursive math.
Oh, wow.
The reality you inhabit is actively being computed moment to moment by this lattice. If the computation stopped, the physical universe wouldn't just freeze in place, it would cease to be.
That is staggering to think about. All right, so if the UDO is the core server, how does it actually render reality? The text outlines 5 specific mathematical engines, the TDLEs, that do this heavy lifting. But I don't want to just read a list of equations,
That gets dry.
Yeah, I want to understand the logic. If you're building a universe from scratch, what is the very first thing your code needs?
Well, you need baseline transmission. I mean, if you are going to have a universe where information and energy interact, you have to have a maximum speed limit for how fast that information can travel across the lattice. You need a refresh rate.
Which brings us to the first equation in the cluster, what the text calls the C clause.
Yes, the C clause. The manuscript describes this as d squared photon plane recursion.
Which is a mouthful.
It is. But in simple terms, this mathematical operator provides the base carrier wave for reality. It basically sets the speed of light scaling.
Because c is the speed of light in physics.
Exactly. Without the C clause, energy wouldn't know how fast to propagate. It essentially creates the fundamental tempo of the physical universe.
Okay, so we have our tempo, our speed limit, but speed without structure is just chaos, right? A universe of pure light just zooming around doesn't give us planets or trees or people. How does the code make things actually stick together?
That requires structural binding, which is handled by the second part, the strong sector equation. This dictates torsion cohesion recursion.
Torsion cohesion recursion, again, sounds incredibly dense. What is actually happening there geometrically?
Let's visualize this. The manuscript describes the underlying geometry of the universe as a dodecahedral lattice cascade.
Okay, a dodecahedron. That's the shape with 12 sides, right?
Yes, a 3D geometric shape with 12 flat pentagonal faces. Imagine the entire universe structured not as an empty, formless void, but as an infinite, invisible honeycomb.
Oh, interesting.
And it's made of these 12-sided geometric rooms, continuously cascading and interlocking into one another.
Like an invisible architectural scaffolding everywhere in space.
Exactly. And the torsion cohesion is basically the mathematical glue holding the walls of those honeycomb rooms together. It stabilizes the geometry. It provides the strong force that allows microscopic structures to bind. And what's truly fascinating here is that the text claims this exact same mathematical recursion dictates binding all the way down to the DNA level in biological organisms.
Wait, really? It connects the macroscopic structure of the universe's vacuum directly to the microscopic twisting of human DNA.
It does. It treats them as the exact same mathematical operation, just scaled differently.
Yeah.
The honeycomb of space and the double helix of DNA are being stabilized by the literal exact same line of code.
Which perfectly sets up the next logical requirement. Because if you have the same code running at the scale of the cosmos and the scale of a microscopic cell, you need an engine that handles that scaling, right?
Correct.
You need something that tells the code how to shrink and grow.
And that is the third piece, the universe master equation. The text refers to this as the full D-ladder recursion.
D-ladder.
Yeah, think of a ladder extending infinitely up into the macro universe, like the galaxies, and infinitely down into the quantum realm, like the quarks. This equation acts as the central recursion engine governing amplification. It basically allows the mathematical operators to move up and down the rungs of dimensional scale without losing their structural integrity.
So we have speed, we have geometric glue, and we have the ability to scale up and down. But how does it know what shape to grow into? Nature isn't just rigid blocks, It spirals, it's branches, it's fluid.
Right, that fluidity, that recognizable pattern of natural growth, is governed by the fractal field equation. This equation drives a continuous golden ratio cascade across the entire lattice.
The golden ratio, 1.618.
That's the one.
We see it in sunflower seeds, hurricane spirals, nautilus shells. It's everywhere.
Right. Now, in standard science, we often view the golden ratio as sort of a beautiful byproduct of evolutionary efficiency.
Like nature just found the best way to pack seeds.
Exactly. But in TDUFT, phy is not a byproduct. It is the primary generative command.
Oh, wow.
The fractal field equation forces the energy of the universe to fold and cascade specifically according to the golden ratio. It ensures that as the universe scales, it scales fractally, meaning the part always reflects the whole.
Okay, this is all incredibly elegant. But I have to play devil's advocate here for a second.
Sure, go ahead.
We have all this beautiful, invisible geometry scaling perfectly, acting like a computer program, but I can knock on my wooden desk right now. It has weight, it has mass, pure geometry doesn't have mass. How does the source code actually generate something heavy?
That is the final and perhaps most critical piece of the TD-LOE cluster. The mass identity equation. It basically mathematically converts this higher dimensional operator action into macroscopic three-dimensional force. It bridges the gap between pure math and physical density.
The equation given in the text is mass equals the speed of light cubed times time, divided by the gravitational constant.
Yes. M equals c cubed t over g. Now look at what that equation is doing conceptually. It takes the speed of light, which is our baseline resource rate, it cubes it, factors in the flow of time, and divides it by gravity. The manuscript is arguing that mass isn't the fundamental stuff,
Right.
Mass is a symptom. It is the geometric resistance created when these infinite operators fold into a three-dimensional volume.
So mass is basically just the mathematical friction of the code running.
Exactly. Friction is a great way to put it.
Okay, my mind is thoroughly expanded right now. We have these 5 rendering engines: speed, structure, scale, fractal growth, and mass, and they are all running on the UDO server. But this begs an enormous question. If the universe is a continuously running computation, what keeps it from crashing? I mean, any system with moving parts, even mathematical ones, has the potential to spiral out of control, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And this takes us directly to what the text calls the Eternum Nexus.
The Eternum Nexus.
Right. If the UDO is the server, the Eternum Nexus is the ultimate boundary condition. It is the absolute unbreakable rule that prevents the system from tearing itself apart.
The text describes the Eternum Nexus as the symbolic compression of the entire generative architecture into a single identity. It's written out as a pretty crazy formula.
Let's hear it.
It's 1/2 of alpha times phi plus beta times the SI all squared. And that ultimately equals phi times psi times -0, which resolves to pi squared.
Huh.
And it carries this strict constraint that the variables alpha plus beta must always equal 4.
Yeah, I know that sounds like an impenetrable wall of algebra for anyone just listening.
Totally, it's a lot.
But we really need to look at the conceptual heartbeat of that equation, because the entire stability of the universe rests on 2 specific variables in that string: phi and psi.
Right, and here's where I really had to pause and scratch my head when reading the sources. The core variables are phi, which is the golden ratio, which, as we discussed, is a geometric constant, and psi.
Right.
But the text defines phi as velocity, representing expansion. And it defines psi as time, representing contraction. And it states that their product phi multiplied by psi must always equal -1. This is what it calls the invariant of creation.
The eternal seal.
But wait, I have to challenge this. For the listener trying to process this, it just sounds like alphabet soup. I mean, phi is a number derived from geometry. It's from the Fibonacci sequence. How can the author just declare that phi is suddenly velocity and psi is time? Isn't that arbitrarily mashing together pure mathematics and physical cosmology?
It does seem like that at first glance.
Yeah, it feels like saying the number 3 is a bicycle.
I completely understand the friction there. It's a very natural reaction. But what's fascinating here is how the author addresses this exact tension. Within the TD-UFT system, they are not arbitrarily mashing things together. Phi and psi are what we call conjugate operators.
Conjugate operator.
Yes, they are the dual opposing roots of the system's foundational equation.
So what does that mean in plain English?
It means they are perfectly mathematically opposed. Think of them as the inhale and the exhale of reality. In this framework, velocity and time are not just physical measurements you take with a stopwatch and a radar gun, right?
Yep.
They are the physical projections of this deep mathematical opposition. Velocity is the mathematical act of expansion. Time is the mathematical act of contraction.
Ah, so when the math expands, we perceive it physically as velocity, and when the math contracts, we perceive it physically as time.
Exactly. They are the same geometric mechanism, just running in opposite directions. The conjugate product, which is phi times psi equals -1, is the invariant of creation. It is the eternal seal between expansion and contraction. It is the single boundary condition that allows the physical lattice to exist in a state of dynamic tension without ever tearing itself apart or collapsing.
So that the perfect balancing act.
A perfect razor-thin balancing act. The source text actually mentions a quaternary seed selected by what it calls the infinite mandala, which it loosely associates with God, or source.
Right, the infinite creator.
Yeah. This seed is composed of 4 mathematical states:
Oh.
0, -0, 1, and -1. The division of unity into phi and psi is essentially the very first act of dimensional differentiation.
It's the exact moment the infinite potential actually acquires structure. It splits into push and pull. And imagine if this balance were slightly off, you know.
Right, even by a fraction.
Yeah, if phi times psi equaled, say, negative 1.00001, the push would be just slightly stronger than the pull. Over billions of years, the universe would infinitely expand into a chaotic, formless wave.
Heat death, essentially.
Exactly. Or if it were negative 0.999, the pull would win, and the universe would instantly contract into absolute nothingness. So the eternum nexus is the unyielding operator that enforces this exact, perfect equilibrium.
And that perfect equilibrium is what allows the primordial waste of energy to collapse into stable structure in the first place. Which actually brings us to an incredible historical juncture.
I know where you're going with this.
Because while this manuscript was written recently, there is a historical figure who seemingly glimpsed this exact code in its raw mathematical form over a century ago.
Yes. Okay, so we have this perfect balance between expansion and contraction holding the universe together. The obvious question any skeptic would ask is, has any human math ever proven this?
Right.
And actually, long before supercomputers or quantum physics, an untrained clerk in India was writing out this exact balancing act on pieces of scrap paper, Srinivasa Ramanujan. We're talking about one of history's greatest, most enigmatic mathematical geniuses.
Enigmatic is almost an understatement for him. Ramanujan's story is one of the most astonishing in the history of science.
For listeners who might not know the backstory, Ramanujan lived in the early 1910s. He had almost no formal mathematical training at all. He was working as a shipping clerk in Madras, living in pretty deep poverty, yet he was producing thousands of mathematical theorems that were so advanced they completely baffled the greatest minds at Cambridge University when he mailed them his notebooks.
Yeah, G.H. Hardy at Cambridge was stunned. And Ramanujan claimed that the equations were placed directly into his mind by his family goddess, Namagiri.
He literally said the goddess wrote them on his tongue in his sleep.
He would essentially wake up with these massively complex, infinite series already fully formed in his head. And the source text argues that what Ramanujan was actually seeing, what he was somehow tapping into, were fragments of the TDUFT source code.
The alignment presented in the manuscript is just uncanny. Ramanujan is famous for his identities, like the Rogers-Ramanujan continued fraction and the modular identities found in his famous Lost Notebook. And what George James Dukas points out is that Ramanujan's math maps perfectly, flawlessly onto the TDUFT framework.
Specifically, his phi identities. Ramanujan wrote extensively using infinite mathematical structures, things like continued fractions, nested radicals, modular products, Q products.
But let's translate some of that jargon for the audio listener, because looking at a Ramanujan continued fraction on paper is a really wild experience.
It really is.
It looks like a staircase descending into madness. It's a fraction, where the denominator is another fraction which contains another fraction, going down forever. It is a visual representation of infinity.
That is a brilliant way to conceptualize it. It is an infinite wave dimension, a mathematical recursion that literally goes on forever. But here is the miracle of Ramanujan's work. In every single one of those specific identities, he takes this infinite cascading staircase and he forces it to resolve. He mathematically bounds the infinity.
He puts a floor on the bottomless pit.
Exactly. And every single time that infinite wave is properly bounded in these identities, it collapses into a specific constant.
And that constant is phi.
Always phi, the golden ratio.
Here's where it gets really interesting. That is mind-bending. An infinite cascade of numbers, when finally forced into a box, perfectly yields 1.618.
And this is exactly why the TDUFT assignment of phi to velocity is structurally validated by the text. Because when you perform a substitution, when you take Ramanujan's equations and replace the geometric concept of phi with the physical concept of velocity, which we denote as v, his pure math perfectly mirrors the TDUFT velocity stabilization mechanisms.
Hold on, say that again, because I want to make sure the listener caught that. If you swap the golden ratio for velocity in his century-old math, it perfectly describes modern quantum stabilization.
Yes, it really does. Mechanisms like gate resonance stability or vacuum extraction. In the TDUFT framework, what Ramanujan was doing without realizing the cosmological implications at all was mathematically proving how an infinite universe stabilizes itself into a single functional speed limit.
Wow.
The contingent fraction is velocity acting as a fixed point. The nested radical is velocity extending into infinite geometric depth. The modular product is velocity operating as an attenuated infinite wave.
It's as if Ramanujan found, like, scattered puzzle pieces of the universe's source code lying on the floor in 1913. He didn't have the box cover to see that the puzzle actually built a unified physics engine for the cosmos. He just intuitively knew the pieces fit together beautifully.
Exactly. He wasn't writing about cosmology. He didn't know what a quark was. He was writing about pure number theory. But the structure of his mathematics matches the TDUFT cosmology perfectly. He proved that when you bound infinity, it stabilizes into phi.
Which gives me absolute chills. But Ramanujan didn't just stop at phi, did he? He also tackled pi, the circle constant.
He did.
And this is where the manuscript takes us from understanding the underlying code to understanding the actual physical geometry of creation. How does a math formula describe the physical birth of three-dimensional space?
To understand this, we have to deeply analyze the Ramanujan-Chudnovsky pi identity. The source material breaks this incredibly complex equation down not as a human method to calculate the decimal digits of pi, but as a literal construction protocol for reality.
A construction protocol.
Yes, it is a geometric rendering pipeline, a blueprint for how the universe takes a formless wave of energy, bends it into a flat circle, and then inflates it into a 3D sphere.
Okay, I need visual analogies here. Don't just give me the equation, what is the math actually doing? The text breaks it down into a sequence. Walk me through how we get from a wave to a sphere.
Let's do it step by step. The first element in the equation is an infinite asymmetric sum. In the TDUFT ontology, this represents the primordial wave.
Starting point.
Right. Think of an open, linear, pre-creation wave of pure energy.
Yep.
It's infinite, it's oscillating, but it has no boundary. It's just raw, uncontained potential stretching forever.
Okay, so I'm picturing a single, infinitely long, vibrating string.
Good. Now, the equation introduces a specific operator, a square root,
Yeah.
specifically the square root of length 5.
Wait, the square root of 5? Geometrically, how does a square root do anything to a physical wave? I'm trying to picture this.
Think of that straight line of energy. Now, mathematically, force that line to possess 2 dimensions at once. How do you do that? It has to bend. A square root geometrically acts as an axis splitter. It takes a one-dimensional wave and breaks it into independent 90-degree components. It forces the line to turn a hard corner, creating the 4 quadrants of a 2D plane.
Oh, so the square root is basically the cosmic origami fold that creates the first corner.
Exactly. Which leads to the next mechanism in the equation, which is quadrant stepping. The formula contains alternating signs, positive, negative, and constants that are strict multiples of 4.
Multiples of 4 fitting the 4 quadrants.
Yes. This mathematical sequence literally forces the wave energy to rotate sequentially through the 4 90-degree quadrants it just created. It bends the wave around a central origin point.
So first we made a corner, and now we are forcing the energy to trace a path around all 4 corners, kind of like drawing a box.
A curved box, yes. And once it's bent all the way around, the equation executes a squaring function. Squaring the entire formula binds those 4 quadrants together perfectly. It eliminates the directional negatives, the open ends, and locks the wave into a seamless, continuous, 2-dimensional circle. That is pi.
The raw wave is now a closed loop, but we don't live in a 2D closed loop. We live in a 3D reality with depth.
Which brings us to the final lift. By mathematically squaring pi creating pi squared, the equation provides the geometric thrust to lift the flat 2D circle into a 3D spherical volume. This is the creation of real harmonic structure. The flat circle inflates into a sphere.
Like blowing up a bubble of reality.
Yes, and finally the boundary condition, pi squared minus 1. Subtracting unity, the -1, breaks the perfect mathematical symmetry, and in physics, broken symmetry is what creates material reality. It's what allows particles to precipitate out of the pure math.
I need to pause you there because my brain is flashing a massive warning light.
Okay, what is it?
Mathematical operations. Like square roots, squaring, subtracting 1. These are human tools. We invented these symbols to balance checkbooks, to measure farmland, to build bridges. Are the sources saying the universe literally uses square roots to bend reality?
If we connect this to the bigger picture and fully embrace the mathematical monism of TDUFT, the answer is a resounding yes.
Really?
In this framework, operators are not human tools. They're pre-creation architectures. The reason we humans use square roots in nuclear physics or to calculate quantum orbitals today is because the universe inherited these exact operators during its creation.
We didn't invent the square root.
We discovered it. We discover the very tool the universe used to fold itself into existence. The math is the ontology.
It's like finding a hammer lying around inside a finished house and slowly realizing it's the exact same hammer used to frame the walls.
That's a perfect way to look at it.
The text even points to a specific 2D exponent angle map hidden in Ramanujan's equation, doesn't it? Something like 3m plus 12.
Yes, this is a beautiful piece of evidence for the origami concept you mentioned earlier. The text reads that specific exponent not just as a number, but as a literal drawing routine through the quadrants of a circle.
How so?
Well, the 12 is the square root, the primordial split that lays down the axis. The 32 stroke carries the arc through to 3/4 of the circle. The 43 stroke completes the closure. And the net geometric effect of those movements, if you multiply 32 times 43, equals 2.
The squaring bind.
Exactly. Split, extend, close, bind. It is a mechanical, mathematical folding of energy.
That is just, it's poetry disguised as calculus. It really is. But it brings us to the ultimate climax of this manuscript, section 5.
With the human element.
Right. We now understand the underlying code. We understand the 6 equations of the TDLOEs. We see how the Eternum nexus keeps it stable. We see how Ramanujan's math proves it. And we just trace the geometric origami of folding a wave into a 3D sphere.
A lot of ground covered.
A ton. But where do we fit? Where do you, the listener, and I fit into this cold, mechanical, mathematical lattice? Because a universe made of pure math sounds really devoid of life.
And this is what the manuscript calls the mind-blowing implication. If the TDLOEs and the UDO are the generative code of reality, then conscious intent is not an afterthought or a biological accident. Conscious intent, when properly coupled to the system, is a first-class mathematical operator within the lattice.
So, what does this all mean for human potential? The text boldly brings up the concept of telekinesis, right? And I want to be clear for everyone listening, it does not talk about it in a superhero, comic book, sci-fi way.
No, it approaches it in a purely structural, computational way. In standard physics, if you want to move a coffee cup across a table, you have to apply physical force. Think of reality like a locked door. Standard physics tries to open that door by ramming it with a shoulder. That's physical force.
Right, you push it.
What this theory suggests is that telekinesis, or moving matter with the mind, is not pushing against physics. It is achieving a coupling lock. It requires precise geometry, frequency, will, and coherence.
So not just staring at a cup really hard?
Exactly. When those align, your consciousness acts as a key cut to the exact mathematical grooves of the universe's lock. You aren't pushing the door. You're just turning the tumblers of the code. You are executing a legitimate rewrite command at the source code level.
You're not fighting the rendering engine. You're sending an authorized command directly to the server.
Exactly, because the system isn't pushing against physics. It is the physics running its own deeper instruction set.
But how does a biological, squishy human brain interface with a geometric mathematical lattice? The text provides a biological interface for this, right? It points directly to our DNA.
It does.
It describes DNA as zero-point engines, or biological batteries that specifically step down the phi geometry, the golden ratio code, into physical, biological form.
Right. And furthermore, it describes the human mind itself as possessing a dodecahedral geometry. It acts as the specific antenna or interface to this phi universe. Now, this raises a deeply profound question about the boundary between mind and matter.
Right, the classic ghost in the machine problem in philosophy. How does an immaterial thought cause a physical neuron to fire?
In our standard worldview, there's a hard, impenetrable wall between the invisible thoughts in your head and the physical cup on your desk. They're made of fundamentally different stuff.
Right.
But in TDUFT, there is no boundary. Mind and matter are different projections of the exact same unified dimensional operator. They are made of the exact same mathematical substance.
So my thought of moving the cup and the cup itself are just different lines of the same code.
Precisely. The universe is described as a static projection, and your DNA is the local biological interface allowing the universe to experience its own projection.
It sounds like we aren't just players moving around inside a pre-rendered video game. Our DNA is actually a series of biological Wi-Fi routers connecting our consciousness directly to the game's core server, giving us developer-level access to the code.
That is the precise, breathtaking implication of the entire manuscript. The 6 equations are the grammar of reality. Coupling your intent is the authentication process. Locked, coherent intent is the execution of a command.
Wow.
The boundary between you and the physical world completely dissolves because both are being computed by the exact same math. You are not an outside force intervening upon a finished world. You are an active node modifying the generative recursion from within.
Okay. Let's take a deep breath and recap this incredible journey because we have covered staggering cosmological ground today.
We really have. Yeah.
We started with the concept that reality is computed. We looked at the 6 equations of the TDLOEs, the rendering engines that give us speed, structure, scale, growth, and mass. We moved to the ultimate boundary rule, the Eternum Nexus, where the delicate conjugate balance of phi and psi keeps the universe from tearing apart.
The eternal seal.
Right. We explored how Srinivasa Ramanujan, a clerk in 1910s India, received mathematical prophecies that mirrored this exact code, proving that bounding infinity yields the golden ratio. We tracked the geometric origami of pi, folding primordial waves into 3D spheres. And we finally arrived at our own biology, realizing that our DNA acts as zero-point engines connecting our minds directly to this foundational lattice.
It is a monumental framework, and in the epilogue of the manuscript, George James Dukas offers a final, sweeping philosophical reflection on everything he has presented. He describes the universe as an infinite mandala.
An infinite mandala.
Boundless corridors of pure, interlocking geometry. It is infinite in scale, yet perfectly contained by its own mathematical rules, a fractal field without a boundary. And ultimately, he concludes that this entire system is, in essence, structured consciousness dreaming in phi.
Structured consciousness dreaming in phi. I love that. So, to you listening, you are not just a biological accident floating around in a cold, random, uncaring void. You are a localized node of the universe's own source code. You are constructed by the exact same mathematical operators that fold infinite waves of energy into spiraling galaxies.
You are inside the thought of the cosmos, actively transducing the geometry of creation every time your heart beats.
Which leaves us with a final, provocative thought to mull over as you go about your day. If your DNA truly is a transducer for the universe's source code, and if your conscious will, when coherent, can act as a literal rewrite command on reality, what code are you accidentally writing right now with your daily habits, your passing thoughts, and your focus? Are you programming the reality you actually want to live in? Think about it. You're not just looking at the X-ray of the universe. You're radiating the light.